Oh, you.
Only 5 out of 20 are still alive. 5 participants of one of the most secret and ambitious missions of the Soviet Union.
Major Yury Gagarin is in Moscow.
They dared to do all kinds of experiments, testing the limit of human endurance. Every one of them wanted to be the first. They were all ready to risk their lives.
Let's go!
They were the first cosmonaut squad. These men were chosen to prepare for the first ever human spaceflight. Every year, the 5 remaining members of the group gathered together on the birthday of the first cosmonaut in his native city that now bears his name. Alexei Homenchuk was an engineer and a helicopter pilot just 18 months ago. Now he is a candidate to become a cosmonaut.
Frankly speaking, I never thought I was suitable for becoming a cosmonaut. But after a little training, I saw they were human beings just like anybody else.
You should stop turning it.
These simulators are constructed especially for the cosmonauts. They have no electronics or digital technology involved. Cosmonauts set the speed with their own movement. This is about the only way to keep muscles toned in a weightless environment. Future cosmonaut Alexei exercises 3 times a week, but for those from the first squad, this kind of training would be considered a walk in the park.
The first squad had to do too many physical exercises because people did not know from where to start.
Here they are, the men from the very first top-secret Soviet squad of cosmonauts. This video footage was for exclusive internal use only. Nobody was supposed to know anything about their mission, not even their family or friends. All 20 men were finally approved less than a year before one of them flew into orbit. They were selected from thousands of the best flight schools across the country. All of them were flying aces under the age of 35, with impeccable profiles and in perfect health.
If you had fillings in 7 out of 32 teeth, or had some little spots because of dental caries, that was enough to completely rule you out of the running.
8 months until liftoff. Time was running out. The United States was also preparing its own first human spaceflight. The Soviet Presidium secretly ordered that a Soviet man must be the first one to fly into space at any cost. As the physical tests on the first cosmonaut squad increased, so did the mental stress. There was not a single minute of downtime for the men. They endured tests and medical examinations, followed by flights to the maximum heights possible and parachute training, all on top of their daily exercise. This footage shows the first squad taking a rare day off in the Moscow region. But before it ended, one of the 20 squad members had wrecked his chances of flying into orbit.
We had just arrived when that hothead didn't look before he tried to leap into the water. He ended up with a broken cervical vertebra and spent several months in hospital. After that, he was discharged from duty.
Valentin Varlamov was the first one to drop out from the cosmonaut squad for medical reasons. Alexei Homenchuk is undergoing centrifuge training. They are checking if he can bear the extreme forces of gravity during takeoff. During rotation, a cosmonaut must not only keep conscious, but also be able to distinguish and remember letters and symbols after the ordeal. The amount of force inside a centrifuge is measured in G. An average person can sustain no more than 5 G. In other words, 5 times the force of gravity. For today's cosmonauts, the highest they go is 8 G, but the first squad was put through the absolute maximum of 12 G.
12G was very scary. They spun us in a centrifuge captured from Germany after the Second World War. It was the only one we had. In addition, it was an open centrifuge and it was cracked all over. By 9G it was creaking, and when it hit 12G, I didn't care about the force anymore. I was more concerned about whether it would fly off. Everything was about to collapse.
Yury Gagarin was in superb physical shape, but even those tests were torture for him. As the speed in the centrifuge grows, it becomes harder to breathe. The head feels heavy, as if it is filled with lead.
They carried out a research on how long a person can stand it. They tested it out on me. The direction of the force from head to pelvis. At 5G for 30 seconds. Then at 6G for 30 seconds. At 7G for 30 seconds. At 8G, I began to black out and went almost blind. After just 13 seconds, I had completely passed out.
The cosmonauts underwent hundreds of thousands of tests on various machines. As it turned out later, the only thing they did was harm their health.
A great number of doctors quickly appeared to carry out serious scientific experiments on human beings.
We were guinea pigs. That's what they called us, to tell the truth.
7 months until liftoff. 6 men were selected out of the remaining 19. The rest were supposed to act as backup, but they continued the preparations without any breaks. One of the 6 could have been replaced at any time. It was joked that all of them would fly into space in a couple of years, and that more people would be needed, because spaceships would be multi-seated. Anatoly Kartashov was among the top 6 cosmonauts. He was considered one of the strongest in the team. Anatoly could easily endure 12 Gs time and again, but his medical results proved otherwise.
Blood vessels on his back had burst. That means if those on his back burst, they could burst in the brain. This can be deadly. He was dismissed from the cosmonauts and continued working as a pilot.
Kartashov was replaced by Grigory Nelyubov. It was he who was bold enough to say what many were afraid to at a reception held by the commander of the Air Force.
Grigory Nelyubov stood up and said, "Comrade Chief Marshal, we have an impression that they do not prepare us for spaceflight, but rather test what we can survive." The commander appointed a responsible person and said that they had selected those people from 3,000 pilots, not for one single flight, and that they would need them in the future. He ordered a review of the training program to be less of a strain on their health.
Here you can see the elite of space exploration, the youngest and the strongest men. Their occupation was top secret. We asked people if they could recognize any of them in the picture, and they could not. Everything about them was classified.
This is a museum in the city of Gagarin, devoted to the first spaceflight, the famous cosmonauts' home city. Here you can see the training simulators the first squad actually used. This rotating chair tested Yury Gagarin himself. The unique exhibit finally appeared in the museum's collection in 2011.
You can see the low-pressure chamber in which Yury Gagarin also underwent a test. There was an accident in this very isolation chamber.
What happened in this chamber was kept secret for a long time. An isolation chamber is a special airtight, soundproof room in which low-pressure conditions are created. A cosmonaut would be left here all alone for 10 to 15 days. Only the essentials were inside the room: food, water, and a cooking stove. Communication was one way. The cosmonaut was to report regularly on his condition, to take readings of his organs with the help of sensors. Talking to the cosmonaut was forbidden. Lab assistants could only monitor him through a small window. But on one fateful day when the cosmonaut urgently needed help, none of the researchers was close by.
Valentin Bondarenko was going to take an EEG, and to do this one has to put on a special cap with sensors. For this it is necessary to rub the skin with alcohol to ensure good contact with the sensors. At the time, there was a cooking stove beside him.
He was going to cook himself a meal, and a piece of cotton wool dipped in alcohol fell down onto the heated stove. There was a higher oxygen content inside the chamber than normal, so the cotton wool caught fire instantly.
Those on duty were meant to be watching him through the window. If anything were to happen, they were to open the door immediately. But they noticed it too late.
When they managed to pull him out, his whole body was burned. Only his palms were intact. More than 75% of his skin had been scorched.
When he was taken out of the chamber, he said that he was the only one to blame, rather than anybody else.
Valentin Bondarenko died in hospital several hours later. He was not even among the top 6. Valentin was part of the backup team and was supposed to fill in for one of the favorites should anything happen. Among the other cosmonauts, Valentin was the youngest. He was only 24. At the time, even the death of the cosmonaut could not put a halt to the program. There were only 3 weeks before liftoff.
Wealthy British scion Zach Wilson, investment activist.
Markets, finance, scandal. Find out what's really happening to the global economy in Kaiser Report on RT.
There hasn't been anything yet on TV. It is to get the maximum political impact possible. The full source material is what helps keep journalism honest. We want to prove you. We wanted to present something else.
Three weeks until liftoff. 6 men were still preparing for the flight.
We were unaware of who would be the first one until the very last moment. Viktor Gorbatko and I agreed that Yury Gagarin should be the one. And others said that the honor should go to German Titov. And then Mars Rafikov said that he had to be the first to fly, because his first name was the same name as a planet.
When the 6 men were taken to the hangar where the Vostok spacecraft was being prepared, Chief Rocket Designer Sergei Korolyov asked who would like to get inside. Gagarin cried out that he did. Before getting in, Gagarin took off his shoes and only then got inside. Korolyov used to say that was when Gagarin stood out from the crowd.
1 week until liftoff, the names of the first 3 candidates for the spaceflight were finally announced.
Senior Lieutenant Yury Gagarin, Senior Lieutenant German Titov, and Captain Grigory Nilubov.
The goal of the three men was to survive in extreme conditions. They were put through an emergency landing and had to endure freezing cold temperatures of -20 degrees Celsius in a forest. They would have to wait for 2 days before rescue arrived. A basic survival kit was on board: an axe, a stock of food, and first aid supplies. There was a good reason for testing the cosmonauts in this way. After the emergency landing of the Voskhod 2 spacecraft in 1965, cosmonauts Pavel Belyaev and Alexei Leonov also had to wait for 2 days for rescue. Weakened after the flight, they found it difficult to move.
The first night we slept in a spaceship. On the second day, the rescuers found us and they built us a small wooden hut. We even washed ourselves. The locals brought a huge cauldron. We heated the snow, and Pavel and I were sitting in this cauldron like two devils.
After the incident, they decided at the center that all cosmonauts should acquire the skills necessary for surviving in extreme conditions. 4 days until liftoff.
The State Commission recommends that the first person to fly into space should be Senior Lieutenant Yury Gagarin.
German Titov was named backup pilot, while Grigory Nelyubov was in third place. Of the three cosmonauts, he saw neither glory nor honors. Nelyubov was the only one never to perform a spaceflight. His name was almost completely erased from the history of space exploration.
He was arrogant. I remember how, without having flown into space, he behaved as if he had done so.
In April 1962, Nelyubov was expelled along with Ivan Anikeyev and Valentin Filatyev from the first cosmonaut squad for breaching discipline.
They were sitting in a cafe drinking beer despite the fact that they were wearing uniform. Patrol officers came by and asked them to leave because it was against regulations. Grigory started saying something like, "Do you know who I am? Do you have any idea of what I can do to you?" The head of the patrol did not hesitate to detain them.
The squad gathered together to vote on the matter of their expulsion. Grigory, Valentin, and Ivan acted in a proper manner, and they also raised their hands. So 3 days later, they were no longer there. All three of them were sent to different military units.
Nelyubov, together with his wife, were sent the farthest, to the Far East.
This picture was taken when Grigory was in the team. But in this picture, from a newspaper, his face is blurred out. When Grigory looked at it, he told me this: "I have been deleted. I am no more."
Three years later, Grigory Nelyubov died. He was hit by a train. But the wife of cosmonaut number 3 is certain that her husband committed suicide. Her main evidence is a note which says, "Zinaida, you have always been the best. It is not easy to find a woman like you. I am sorry." Zinaida believes that her husband could not accept the fact that he had been dismissed from the cosmonaut squad, so he chose a different path to the heavens.
With God's help,
today Alexei has his first training session in so-called open space.
Is there any ventilation? Are you comfortable?
Water is as close to the weightlessness of space as the cosmonauts can get on Earth. A spacecraft compartment is put into a pool. This simulator is for cosmonauts to learn how to repair a spacecraft and conduct research outside the capsule.
Good luck.
Alexei cannot move independently underwater. His spacesuit weighs 200 kilos. In open space, the cosmonaut can count only on himself. The need for such training became evident already after Alexei Leonov's first ever spacewalk. March 18th, 1965. Looking at these shots, it is hard to believe that Alexei Leonov is struggling to save his life. A malfunction in his spacesuit made it difficult to re-enter the capsule. Staying outside was a risk, as there was only enough reserve air in the suit for 30 minutes. Reducing pressure was also dangerous, as it could cause his blood to boil, which could lead to paralysis or even death. To get back into the spaceship, he had to take a gamble.
I still don't understand how I did it, but it cost me so much energy that I felt that I was losing strength. All my attempts to get inside with my feet first failed. So I put my head inside the airlock, gripped it with my hands and started moving head first. But I realized I wouldn't be able to get inside like this.
Alexei Homenchuk has also faced some problems today. The future cosmonaut not only has to forget about the discomfort inside the suit, but also to quickly focus on his work to avoid mistakes while repairing the outer sheet. He must learn to do the simplest operations instinctively to avoid problems in space.
Alexei, you won't be able to stick it there.
Sorry for being slow.
Push that pedal over there.
If Alexei Homenchuk successfully passes his exams in general space training, he will be enrolled into Cosmonaut Squad number 15, but nobody knows how long he may have to wait for his first flight. According to the statistics provided by the Russian Training Center, little more than half of the cosmonauts who finish the program eventually go into space.
Let's go!
Yury Gagarin became the first and most famous cosmonaut of the squad. At that moment, the only one. In fact, all the other, yet unknown cosmonauts of the Star Squad were also present there in the crowd, welcoming Gagarin. They were wearing civilian clothes for security reasons.
They used to tell us that we would have to retire in a couple of years, but it so happened that I flew only after 8 years passed. In fact, I was the 21st to fly, even though the first squad consisted of 20 men. But they were constantly replacing one cosmonaut with another. For instance, after Gagarin came the first woman in space, Valentina Tereshkova.
When the moon program I was preparing for was cancelled, I was appointed the spaceship commander of Soyuz 11. But 11 hours before the launch, my crew was replaced. We didn't fly to the station, and the whole crew of Soyuz 11 died in an accident. Then the second mission was cancelled, the third mission was cancelled. 10 years of continuous training for flights. But who knows about it?
Waiting for their hour of triumph was a serious psychological challenge. Many had to wait for years. Cosmonaut Dmitry Zaykin was a lifelong backup cosmonaut. They promised him that he would fly soon, but after a regular medical examination, he was told that he had an ulcer.
According to the decree on cosmonauts, one cannot fly to space with an ulcer, even though you can recover from it.
In spite of everything, Dmitry Zaykin has no regrets. In the squad, he met his wife Tatiana, who worked as a nurse and became the light of his life. They have their own personal history of flight and space exploration.
She came to work for the squad right before Gagarin was going to leave for the launch. That was when I saw my Tanya.
At the rally, after Gagarin's flight, one employee told me, "There is a young man over there. He's got dark glasses on, so he thinks that no one can see who he's looking at. He never took his eyes off you."
Dmitry and Tatiana have been together for more than 50 years. They have 2 sons and 4 grandchildren. Today, anyone who dreams about the stars can fulfill his or her ambition. The father and mother of this family are both cosmonauts. Mark Sirov was selected for duty first. He immediately decided to become a cosmonaut when he found out that nowadays it is not necessary to be a military pilot. All one needs is a higher technical education and good health.
When I was going through the enrollment process, Elena wanted to take part too.
I wasn't included in the same group as Mark. I had just given birth.
When her daughter was 3 years old, Elena finally passed the entrance exam. Today she is the only woman among all the active cosmonauts. Though Mark entered the service before Elena, her first flight is scheduled for 2014. Today cosmonauts have to spend about 7 years training, but they are no longer plagued with torturous exercises. They learn only what they will really need for spaceflight. And it is all thanks to the first team of cosmonauts who endured the impossible to pave the way to the stars for future generations.